I used to think that maybe, just maybe, something was wrong with me. Not in the way that kids joke when they fall behind in school, or when you get picked last for dodgeball. No, I mean really wrong. Like I had some invisible defect stitched into my skin at birth. Like I was born broken. My name is Charles, and long before I became anything worth remembering, I was the family disappointment. Growing up in our cramped two-bedroom home in a quiet Alabama suburb, I learned early that the word family didn't mean what it did in the movies. Our household wasn't warm. There were no heartfelt dinners, no embraces, no bedtime stories. Just expectations. Constant, crushing expectations, and silence when they weren't being met. My mother was the sharpest blade in that house. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her words cut just fine on their own. She was the kind of woman who could destroy you with a glance and finish the job with a whisper. "You're useless," she used to say, calmly, like it was a scientific observation. "You can't do anything right, Charles. Why are you even trying?" I was 8 the first time she said that. I dropped a glass of milk. I cried, not because of the mess or the punishment. I cried because in that moment I truly believed her, that I was useless, that something in me was defective. My father? He wasn't much better. He was a man of few words and fewer affections. He'd sit in his recliner, the TV always too loud, the beer always half full. And when he did look at me, it was like he was trying to see through me, like I was some ghost that haunted the wrong life. And then there was my brother, Jonathan, 2 years older, star athlete, straight A student, homecoming prince. He never missed a chance to remind me that I was dragging down the family average. "Why can't you be more like John?" Mom would snap. "Your brother doesn't need reminders to take out the trash. Your brother wins medals. Your brother has a future." They love to compare. God, they live for it. So I stopped trying, at least on the outside. Inside, though, I kept score. Every insult, every sarcastic comment, every door slammed in my face. I cataloged it like battle wounds, except no one could see them. And when you're a kid, pain with no proof feels like madness. I started thinking maybe they were right. Maybe I was broken, and maybe I deserved it. School wasn't much better. At best, I was invisible. At worst, I was the kid everyone assumed would drop out by sophomore year. Teachers didn't expect much from me. They didn't ask questions when I failed tests, or when I showed up with bruises from roughhousing. I wasn't failing because I was stupid. I just didn't care. I was tired. Tired of trying to matter in a world that had already made up its mind about me. But there were moments, tiny flickers of light in the dark. One was Mrs. Green, my 5th grade history teacher. She was the first adult who ever told me I had potential. She said it softly, almost like she didn't want to spook me. "You've got a good head on your shoulders, Charles. Don't let them take that away from you." Them. She never said who them was, but I knew. And so did she. At home, nothing changed. If I brought home a B, I was asked why it wasn't an A. If I brought home an A, it was assumed the class was too easy. When I made the JV wrestling team, they didn't come to a single match. When I tried to show my father my certificate for perfect attendance, he didn't even look up from his beer. I stopped showing them anything. I became the ghost they already treated me like. I kept to myself, stayed out of trouble, and kept my head down. But inside, the rage was building. Not the loud, explosive kind. This was quieter, heavier, like a stone pressed against my chest. I remember lying awake most nights, staring at the ceiling, replaying their words in my head like a cursed record. "You'll never amount to anything. No one's going to want someone like you. You can't even take care of yourself." They weren't even yelling when they said it. That was the worst part. They said it like it was fact. But I made a promise to myself. At 13 years old, lying in bed with my fists clenched under the covers and tears dried stiff on my cheeks, I made a silent vow. I will prove them wrong, even if it kills me. I didn't know how. I didn't know when. I just knew that one day I'd walk back through that front door, and they wouldn't recognize the man standing in front of them. Not because I would look different, but because they had never actually seen me in the first place. By high school, the cracks had started to show in our perfect family. My brother went off to college, and my parents acted like they just sent royalty to the throne. They threw a party. Balloons. Cake. A new laptop. Speeches. When I graduated 2 years later, they forgot to even take a photo. No party. No gift. No congratulations. Just a cold dinner, a grunted good job, and a reminder to start looking for a job at the local factory because someone's got to pay rent around here. I was 18, and I was done. The final straw came on a Saturday morning. I had stayed up all night researching something that had become a quiet obsession, the United States Marine Corps. I read everything I could get my hands on, training programs, MOS options, enlistment bonuses. The more I read, the more I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. It was structured, demanding. Brutal, yes, but fair. You earn respect there. You earn rank. Your name means something. I walked into the kitchen that morning and set it straight. I'm going to enlist. My mother didn't even blink. She kept scrubbing the dishes. My father muttered, "You won't make it past boot." And my mother? She just said it. "Don't embarrass yourself, Charles. This isn't a video game. You're not cut out for that kind of life." I walked out of the house that day and didn't look back. But in my mind, I was already planning the moment I would return. Not as Charles, the disappointment, but as Charles, the man they never thought I could be. Some people are born into families that feel like soft blankets. I was born into a comparison chart. There were no real hugs in our house. No Sunday morning pancakes, no family movie nights, no inside jokes. There was only one measurement that mattered: Jonathan. And next to him, I was nothing more than a cautionary tale. He was 2 years older and everything I wasn't. Blonde hair that always sat perfectly no matter what he did to it. Blue eyes that sparkled when he smiled. And that smile? It was the one that earned second helpings at dinner, straight A's pinned to the fridge, and every bit of pride my parents had to give. And then there was me. I was the other one. The one who didn't get it fast enough. The one whose teachers called home for behavior, not awards. The one who never got picked first. The one who heard Jonathan wouldn't have done that more times than he heard his own name. I wasn't just invisible. I was deliberately unseen. It wasn't always so obvious, not at first. When we were little, Jonathan and I actually played together. He let me be his sidekick when we made forts or road bikes. He even stood up for me once when a neighborhood kid threw dirt in my face. I remember clinging to his leg, crying, and hearing him yell, "Hey, don't touch my brother." But something changed when he turned 12. Suddenly, he was the quarterback of the middle school team, and I was the weird little shadow in his hallway. He started laughing at my jokes less, avoiding me more, calling me loser around his friends. I'd still try to sit next to him at dinner, but he'd shift his plate over with a scowl like I was contaminating his airspace. And my parents? They noticed. They just didn't care. In fact, they seemed to encourage it. "Give your brother space." Mom would scold me when I tried to hang around him. "He's got a future to focus on," Dad added, barely looking up from his plate. "You should take notes, Charles. Maybe then you wouldn't be such a damn burden." A burden. That word settled into my chest like cement. Holidays were the worst. Christmas morning, Jonathan got a new iPhone, designer clothes, and a handwritten card full of glowing praise. I got socks and silence. Once, when I asked if we were doing anything for my birthday, my dad laughed and said, "You want cake for showing up late to life?" No one even remembered the next year. Jonathan's birthday? A barbecue, friends over, music, laughter. I watched it all from the upstairs hallway, peeking through the banister like a stranger in my own home. It wasn't just the gifts. It was the praise, the pride. Every time Jonathan scored a touchdown, our mother would scream from the stands like her life depended on it. I remember standing next to her once at a game, and when he scored, she jumped to her feet, clapping and shouting. "He's a natural. That's my boy." I wanted to clap too, but before I could, she turned to me and said, "Don't act like you had anything to do with that." I froze. My hand stayed at my sides. I didn't even understand what I had done wrong. But the worst part? Jonathan believed it. He believed every ounce of praise, every word of admiration, every compliment they handed him like gold. And somewhere along the line, he started to believe that he really was better than me. Not just in football or grades, but in worth. He talked down to me like I was a bug in his room, like I was something unfortunate that shared his DNA. He'd correct me in front of our parents just to embarrass me. Once, I was explaining a science project, and he cut me off. "Don't listen to him. Charles doesn't know what he's talking about. He barely passed the class." They laughed, and I just sat there. But here's the thing about being invisible. You see everything. I saw how Jonathan sucked up to Dad. how he mimicked his mannerisms, tried to laugh like him, drink like him, how he would insult me and look to Dad for approval, like a dog waiting for a treat. I saw how my mother's smile only came alive when Jonathan entered the room, how she would cook his favorite meals and ask how his day was, even when I'd had one too, how her tone changed when she spoke to him, softened just slightly, warmed like a light dimmer she never turned on for me. And I started to understand something very early. Love in this house was conditional. You had to earn it. You had to impress. You had to perform. And I wasn't even invited to the audition. One afternoon, I came home from school clutching an essay I'd worked my ass off for. The prompt was what makes a man honorable. I had poured my heart into it, stayed up late, rewrote every line, checked every comma. And when I got it back, I saw a bright red scrawled at the top with the words, "Brilliant insights, Charles." Powerful voice. My chest swelled. It was the first time I felt proud of something I'd done. Truly proud. I waited until dinner. Waited until everyone was seated. And just before they started eating, I unfolded the paper and placed it in front of them. I got an A, I said, unable to hide the hope in my voice. Mrs. Green said it was one of the best in the class. They barely glanced at it. My mom wiped her mouth with a napkin and said, "That's nice. But don't let it go to your head." Jonathan chuckled. "You probably got lucky," he said, "or the teacher felt bad for you." And just like that, the pride crumbled, like a balloon pricked midair. After that, I stopped sharing my wins. No one wanted to see them anyway. I learned to smile when I was expected to. Learned to nod and stay quiet when Jonathan was being praised. Learned that silence was safer than hope. But I never forgot, and I never forgave. One night, when I was 16, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and looked at myself like I was a stranger. I didn't see potential. I didn't see a future. I saw a collection of other people's opinions, stitched together into something barely functional. But behind my eyes, something else stirred. A flicker, a pulse. Rage, defiance, a quiet, burning refusal to accept that this was all I was. I pressed my palms against the sink and whispered to my reflection, "They don't get to decide who I am." That was the first time I said it out loud. By the time Jonathan graduated and left for college, I had already begun my quiet rebellion. I was reading books on psychology, watching military documentaries, lifting weights in the basement when no one was home. I started eating healthier, drinking more water, going for late-night runs when the air was still and the world felt quiet enough for me to hear myself think. I wasn't training for a sport. I was training to escape. And every time I felt tired, every time I thought about quitting, I'd remember Jonathan's smug face, my mother's dismissive glare, my father's cold silence. And I'd push harder, because if they were going to pretend I didn't exist, then someday I'd give them a version of me so powerful they'd wish they never had. By the time I turned 17, I had mastered the art of invisibility. Not the superhero kind. Not the kind where you sneak past enemies or fade into walls. No, mine was a quieter superpower. It meant never speaking unless spoken to. Keeping my footsteps light enough that they didn't draw attention. Turning the doorknob slowly so it wouldn't click. Breathing quietly at dinner so I wouldn't invite a remark. Leaving rooms before arguments could start. In that house, survival meant silence. But even in silence, something had started to shift inside me. It began one evening with a pair of old running shoes. They weren't mine. I found them at the back of the garage, covered in dust. They had once belonged to Jonathan. Of course, I brushed them off and tried them on. A size too big. A little stiff. Perfect. That night, after everyone went to bed, I crept outside. The Alabama air was thick with humidity, heavy with silence. The neighborhood slept as I stood at the edge of our driveway, the moon hanging above like a single, watching eye. Then I ran. Not far, not fast, just enough to feel like the world was bigger than four walls and a broken kitchen table. I ran until my lungs burned and my calves screamed. I ran until I wasn't Charles, the disappointment. I was Charles, the mover, the pusher, the one who hadn't given up. Running became my escape. Every night, I'd wait for the lights to go out and then slip into the shadows. I'd jog past houses with glowing windows, imagining what their dinners were like. What it was like to be seen, to be loved. I'd pass a playground, sometimes stopping to sit on the swing just to hear the chains creak, just to remind myself that the world made sounds that weren't sharp voices or slamming doors. And in those moments, I felt alive. Around that same time, I got my first job. It was at a small diner off Route 8, the Blue Lantern. Greasy floors, clinking plates, the smell of burnt coffee permanently stitched into the walls. But it was mine. I lied about my age to get hired, said I was 18. They didn't ask for ID. Just wanted someone to mop floors and bus tables without complaining. And I didn't complain. Not once. The manager, Miss Patty, was an older woman with hair, dyed a color not found in nature, and eyes sharper than any knife. But she had a soft spot for hard work. After my second week, she pulled me aside during a cigarette break and said, "You work like you've got something to prove, kid." I looked at her, dead serious, and replied, "I do." She didn't ask for details. She just nodded. "Keep showing up like that, and you'll get somewhere." The first time I brought home a paycheck, I didn't tell anyone. I used it to buy my own protein powder, a secondhand workout bench from a pawn shop, a used copy of Marine Fitness Guidebook I found online. I wasn't just running anymore. I was training. Slowly, quietly, I was building myself, brick by painful brick. Every push-up, every late-night jog, every avoided soda was a vote against who they said I was. And the more I trained, the less their voices haunted me. But the house? The house hadn't changed. Jonathan came home for Thanksgiving that year. Taller, more confident. Dad greeted him with a clap on the back and a beer. Mom made his favorite, roast beef with garlic mashed potatoes. She even wore makeup. Me? I was told to get out of the way when I offered to help at the table. Jonathan dominated the room, talking about his classes, his professors, the amazing internship he was up for. Everyone hung on his every word like he was reciting gospel. At one point, he turned to me and said, "So, you still working that little diner job?" I nodded. "Yeah, been there a few months now." He smirked. "Nice. Real ambitious." They all laughed. I forced a smile, said nothing, but inside, a fuse lit. That night, I did 200 push-ups in my room. I gritted my teeth through every set, sweat dripping from my forehead, arms trembling. "Real ambitious," his voice mocked in my head. "You're useless. You can't do anything right." I pushed until my arms gave out, collapsed onto the carpet, chest heaving, face buried in the scratchy fibers. And I smiled, because every insult was just more fuel. The more I pushed, the more I started seeing results. Not just physically, though I was getting stronger. My chest broadened, my legs thickened, my arms no longer looked like broomsticks. But more importantly, I began to feel different, more grounded, more real. And when I caught my reflection in the diner's window after a long shift, sweat-stained and tired, I no longer saw a ghost. I saw a fighter. Then came a career fair. Senior year, gymnasium packed with tables and recruiters. Colleges, trade schools, local businesses, and then, across the floor, the Marines. Their booth wasn't flashy. Just a simple banner, an American flag, and a man built like a brick wall standing behind a table stacked with brochures. Sergeant Bishop. I remember walking past, trying not to stare, but something pulled me back. He looked me in the eye and said, "You thinking about enlisting?" I hesitated, nodded. "Maybe." He handed me a flyer. "We don't do maybe, son. You'll either make it or you won't." I stared at him, and for the first time in my life, I wanted someone to doubt me, because I knew I'd prove them wrong. At dinner that night, I tested the waters. "I think I want to join the Marines," I said casually. The table fell silent. My mother scoffed. "Oh, please. You." My father didn't even look up. "Don't embarrass yourself, Charles." Jonathan, chewing a mouthful of chicken, mumbled, "Better start doing push-ups now." I didn't respond. Didn't need to. I was already doing 500 a day. A week later, I scheduled a meeting with Sergeant Bishop. And after we talked, after he gave me the rundown on basic training, military structure, qualifications, I knew. This was it. This was my escape. This was my battlefield. Because I didn't just want to leave that house. I wanted to bury the version of myself they created. And I wanted to return one day. Not for acceptance. Not for closure. But for reckoning. I didn't slam the door when I left that morning. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I didn't break plates or demand apologies. I didn't give them the drama they probably expected. Instead, I stood in the doorway with my backpack slung over one shoulder, my enlistment papers tucked inside a plain manila folder, and I said it simply. I'm joining the Marines. The room was silent for a second. Then it exploded. What the hell is wrong with you? My mother shot up from the kitchen table like she'd been slapped. You? The Marines? Are you out of your mind? She was wearing her old bathrobe, hair half curled from sleep, a cup of coffee still steaming in front of her. But the contempt on her face was sharp enough to cut through steel. I'm serious, I said. That's the problem, she snapped. You seriously think you could survive that? You'll get eaten alive. You can't even manage a part-time job without getting exhausted. I've been working at the diner for a year, I said. She waved it off like I confessed to drawing on the walls. Wiping tables isn't surviving boot camp. My father didn't speak right away. He just stood, stretched his back like this conversation was a chore, and cracked open a beer at 9 a.m. He took a long sip and said, without even looking at me, he won't last a week. That's all he offered, just those 6 words. I looked at Jonathan. He was home for spring break, sprawled across the living room couch with one leg slung over the armrest. He gave me a smirk without lifting his eyes from his phone. Cool. Make sure they don't lose your body in the desert. And that was it. No one asked me why. No one asked me when I was leaving. No one asked if I was scared. No one asked if I needed anything. They didn't see me as brave, or strong, or even serious. They saw me as a joke. Again, but for once in my life, that didn't matter. Because this time, I knew they were wrong. I turned toward the door, heartbeat pounding in my ears. My mother's final words chased me as I left. You'll come crawling back, and we won't be here when you do. I paused, turned my head slightly, and for the first time in my life, I smiled at her. I won't come back the same. That's the whole point. And then I walked out of that house, out of that life, out of the narrative they wrote for me. I boarded a Greyhound bus the next morning, alone. All I had was a duffel bag, my enlistment contract, and a heart full of anger so hot it nearly burned a hole in my chest. I didn't cry. I didn't look back. I stared out the window as the trees blurred into brush and farmland. With every passing mile, I felt the weight of their words slipping further behind me. You're useless. You'll never make it. You're not built for this. Good. I'd use every single syllable like fuel. Paris Island hit like a brick wall. If my parents had hoped the Marines would chew me up, they got part of their wish. It did. The first week was hell. I was underfed, overexerted, screamed at, broken down, and remade. Every cell in my body ached. My feet blistered. My hands bled. I watched grown men cry themselves to sleep. I heard guys whispering about quitting by day 3. I saw one guy fake a knee injury just to get out. And me? I dug deeper. Every time I felt like collapsing, I heard Jonathan's voice. You'll get your body lost in the desert. Every time I missed a mark or got screamed at, I saw my father's empty eyes and his beer-cracked lips. He won't last a week. Every time I wanted to give up, I saw my mother sneer. Wiping tables isn't surviving boot camp. And I kept going. I got up earlier than they told us to. Did extra push-ups in the dark. Learned how to fix my gear in silence. Watched how the top performers moved. Studied the silent rules no one taught. I learned fast. Not because I was smarter, but because I had to. Failure meant going back to the people who prayed I would. And that wasn't an option. 2 months in, something shifted. My drill instructor, Sergeant Greaves, called me out after a field test. Reynolds, he barked, voice like gravel, soaked in rage. Come here. I braced myself. He looked me up and down and said, You used to look like you couldn't bench a sandwich. Now you're carrying guys twice your weight. What changed? I didn't answer right away. Then I said, I got tired of being weak, sir. He stared at me for a moment, then gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. You've got fire, Reynolds. That can't be taught. I started to rise. Not fast, not flashily, but consistently, quietly. While others complained, I endured. While others fell behind, I stayed focused. The boy who once stared at ceilings and cried himself to sleep was gone. In his place stood someone else. Someone becoming. Graduation day came fast. They called my name during the final ceremony. Private Charles Reynolds. I stood tall, chest out, back straight, boots polished. My uniform hugged muscle that wasn't there 6 months ago. My posture told a new story. When I walked across the parade deck, I scanned the crowd. Most had family holding signs, waving flags, cheering. I had no one, but I didn't care, because I knew what they didn't. I hadn't lost a family. I had escaped a cage. After graduation, I deployed. And that's when everything changed. War is ugly. People talk about honor and sacrifice, but they don't tell you about the silence between gunfire. The ache of carrying a friend's last words in your chest, like a stone you'll never set down. But it makes you real. Every mission hardened me. I bled beside brothers, carried wounded through sandstorms, dug trenches with cracked hands, comforted rookies who couldn't stop shaking, sat under stars and prayed to gods I didn't believe in. And through it all, one thought kept me going. One day I'll go back, and they'll see what they threw away. There's something about being inches from death that makes you brutally honest with yourself. You can't lie when a bullet just missed your head. You can't pretend when your friend is bleeding out next to you. You can't escape who you really are when the air smells like blood, sand, and smoke. That's where I became the man they never saw. Not in a classroom, not in their dining room, not with a piece of paper or a degree, but on the edge of survival. My first deployment was to Helmand Province. We were supposed to secure a village under threat. Intelligence said it would be light resistance. It wasn't. We were ambushed 3 miles outside the village. A young recruit named Mendoza was blown off his feet by an IED, his scream echoing through the smoke like an alarm bell. I froze. For a split second, one long second, fear gripped me. Not the kind of fear that stops your heart, but the kind that makes you question your right to exist. Then I moved. I don't remember how, just that I did. I reached Mendoza, dragged him by his vest through open ground, bullets kicking up dirt around us like warning shots from God himself. When we got behind cover, I remember looking down at him. He was crying, barely conscious. You're good, you're good. I lied, pressing my hands into the torn muscle of his thigh. You're gonna make it. He didn't. He bled out 12 minutes later in the medevac. His name was stitched into my mind. Mendoza, a 19-year-old from Detroit who loved old westerns and always overcooked his rations. I didn't know him long, but he never got to go home, never got to become the man he might have been, never got to prove his worth to anyone. So I carry that for him. Every mission, every training session, every decision. Do better. Be better. Make it count. I started to rise fast after that. Not because I wanted medals, but because I needed control. The Corps saw something in me. They started giving me more responsibility. Then fire team lead. Then squad leader. Then missions where I had to decide who lived and who died. That power terrified me. But I didn't flinch, because every time I made a call, I did it with Mendoza's face in the back of my mind. He reminded me to be human. I earned my first medal during a hostage rescue in Syria. For civilians. One booby-trapped building. A storm coming in. Time running out. We got them all out. I carried the last one. A little girl, maybe 6, across a mile of broken terrain while enemy fire chased us from behind. I collapsed at the evac point. They said I'd saved her life. But when I looked at her, cradled in her mother's arms, I realized she had saved mine. She reminded me what I was fighting for. Not just revenge, but redemption. Meanwhile, back home, silence. Not a single message from my family. They didn't ask if I was alive. Didn't ask if I was safe. Didn't ask anything. I could have died in that desert, and they wouldn't have known for months. Maybe years. I used to think that would destroy me. Now, it just made me hungrier. Because I wasn't just going to come back to prove them wrong. I was going to come back and show them what they chose not to see. At night, I wrote letters I never sent. To my mother. I still hear you saying I'm not cut out for this. You were right. I'm not. I'm built for this. To my father. You said I'd last a week. It's been 4 years, 3 deployments, and I've been promoted twice. You didn't just underestimate me. You never knew me at all. To Jonathan. Thank for the fuel. Every time I lifted, I saw your smug face. You helped build this body. So thanks, brother. I burned every one of those letters. Didn't need to keep the words. I was already carrying them in my bones. By the time I reached my 6th year, I was a top-level officer. I had a wall full of ribbons, a locker full of citations, a team who would follow me anywhere. I gave speeches, led briefings, mentored new recruits. To them, I was confident, disciplined, stoic. But inside, I still heard her voice. You'll come crawling back. And that's when I made the decision. I would return, not to reconnect, not to forgive, not to fix anything, but to confront them, face to face. I didn't need their acceptance, but they needed to see what they had thrown away. I took a final photo the day I retired. Dress blues, crisp, chest heavy with medals, posture perfect, eyes calm. I looked at it and saw two versions of me standing there. The boy who begged for their approval, and the man who never needed it. It was strange how calm I felt. The same streets I once walked in shame now felt smaller. The same town that used to choke me felt like it had shrunk. Or maybe it had just grown too much to fit inside it anymore. Every step toward that house felt like I was walking through time. Past every insult, past every cold dinner, past every slam of a door behind me. But I wasn't here to look back. I was here to make them look at me. I wore my dress blues, not to impress, to confront. Each medal stitched over my heart was a scar I had earned. Each badge a reminder of what I survived. Each ribbon a word they never said. I'm proud of you. The driveway was the same. Cracked. Weeds growing through the lines. Just like our family, never tended. Left to rot. I rang the doorbell. A second later, I heard footsteps. Then the door opened. And there he was. Dad. He stared at me for a second like he was looking at a stranger. His mouth opened, then closed again. Charles. His voice didn't sound real. Like someone reading a name they never expected to say again. I said nothing. Let the silence hang there. Let him feel it. That same suffocating silence I grew up in. Then I nodded once. Yeah, it's me. He blinked, looked down at the medals, then back at me. You look different. Yeah, I said quietly. Because I am. He stepped aside. I walked past him without asking, my boots clicking hard on the old hardwood floors. The smell was the same, fried grease, dust, cheap air freshener. And then, around the corner, I saw her. Mom, sitting on the couch. Her eyes locked on mine. Time slowed. I waited for the anger, the guilt, the tears. None came. Just a look of cautious recognition, like she couldn't decide if I was real or a memory she'd buried. Then came the first words out of her mouth. You came back. I laughed. Once. Sharp. You make it sound like I left a vacation. She flinched barely. Dad stepped in behind me, still quiet, still trying to make sense of it. And then I heard it from the kitchen. Hey, what's going on out there? That voice. Jonathan. He stepped out holding a beer, still wearing that smugness like a second skin. His eyes hit me, uniform and all. And I saw it. The flicker. That tiny break in his face. The moment he realized I wasn't the same punching bag he remembered. Well, I'll be damned, he said, trying to smirk. Look who it is. Sergeant Loser. Still trying to bite. Still trying to pull me back down. But I didn't take the bait. I stepped forward. Just one step. Controlled. Deliberate. And I said, it's Captain now. The smirk vanished. I watched it die in real time, replaced by confusion, and then something even sweeter. Fear. He looked at the medals. All of them. My nameplate. The insignia. The years of earned respect stitched into every thread of my uniform. And I said, you don't get to call me that anymore. I turned to all three of them. The people who had made me feel like I was nothing. And I finally spoke. The words I'd carried like stones in my chest for years. You told me I'd never be anything, that I'd come crawling back, that I wasn't strong, smart, or good enough. You didn't just fail me. You buried me. And I had to claw my way out of that grave alone. No one spoke, so I kept going. But I made it. I became someone. Not because of you, but despite you. Every insult, every slammed door, every time you looked right through me, you were building this. I tapped the medals. You built this with your hate. My mom finally spoke. I didn't know. We didn't know you'd. You didn't want to know. She stopped. You made a decision about me when I was a kid, and you never looked back. You fed Jonathan with love and starved me with silence. And when I started to grow anyway, you called it rebellion. Jonathan scoffed. Oh, come on. I turned sharply. Shut up. The room froze. I had never said those words to him before. But this time, he obeyed. My father cleared his throat. You have no idea how hard it was raising kids. You're right. I don't. But I do know what it's like being raised by you. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was satisfying, like the final chord of a long, unfinished song. I looked at each of them. You don't get to claim this version of me. You don't get to say we always believed in you, or we're proud of you now. That ship sailed the day you told me I was nothing. The day you watched me walk out and didn't stop me. You can live with your choices, just like I lived with mine. I turned toward the door, my heart calm, my hands steady, my soul free. And just before I walked out, I said one last thing. You were wrong about me, all of you, but I was right about me. And that's all that ever mattered. I stepped outside, the sun at my face. I could hear them behind the door, still stunned, still silent. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care what they thought. I stood tall, not as a son or a brother or a failure, but as a man who reclaimed his story. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about showing off the medals or watching their faces collapse under the weight of their regret. I didn't walk away from that house to prove anything. I walked away because I finally knew who I was, and that truth didn't need their validation anymore. I sat in my car outside their house for a moment, not because I was unsure, not because I needed a breather, but because I wanted to mark it, that exact moment in time, the day I returned home as someone I was finally proud of. And then I drove off. No tears, no triumphant music, no cinematic ending, just the quiet knowledge that I'd made it out. I didn't look back once, because I'd already seen enough of that house, of that life. I'd spent too many years staring into their eyes, begging for crumbs of approval. Too many nights wondering why I wasn't enough. Too many birthdays forgotten, dinners eaten in silence, victories ignored. But none of that had the power to break me. Not anymore. Because that powerless, invisible boy, he had become a man I always dreamed of. People think revenge is loud, explosive, final. But this was quiet, soft, like setting down a heavy bag you've carried your entire life and realizing you can finally breathe without it. There were moments after that when the past tried to sneak in again. Some nights I'd wake up in a sweat, flashes of arguments and slammed doors flashing behind my eyelids. Other times, I'd see fathers hugging their sons at airports or family barbecues, and I'd feel that sting in my chest, the ache of something I never had. But those moments didn't control me anymore. They didn't define me. They just reminded me of how far I'd come, of how much I had built, not from love, but from lack of it. I kept rising in the core, led men, saved lives, built a reputation not for being the loudest or the strongest, but for being the one who never gave up, even when everyone else had. And that mattered more than any family name. And you know what surprised me the most? It wasn't their silence. It wasn't even that they never apologized. It was that I didn't need them to. There was a time I craved it. The apology, the acknowledgement, the moment where they'd fall to their knees and say, "We were wrong." But by the time I faced them, I realized I didn't want an apology. I wanted peace. And peace doesn't come from other people's guilt. It comes from reclaiming your own story. To anyone listening to this, maybe you've got scars too. Maybe you've been told you'll never be enough. Maybe your own blood made you feel like a ghost. Maybe you've carried their voices in your head so long you forgot what your own voice sounds like. Let me tell you something I wish someone had told me. You are not their words. You are not their limits. You are not their failure to love. You are what you choose to become. And sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't rage or confrontation or watching them fall. Sometimes it's simply this: standing tall, even if no one claps, even if no one comes to say, "Well done," even if the only person who sees you is you. Because if you can learn to look in the mirror and love the person looking back, you've already won. That's not just revenge. That's freedom. I live my life now by a simple truth. They had every chance to see me. They chose not to, but I saw myself, and that was all I ever needed. To the boy I used to be, you weren't broken. You were just buried. And look at you now. You grew anyway. You know, sometimes life gives you a family that breaks you down before you've even had a chance to stand. But if you've ever clawed your way out of that darkness, if you've ever rebuilt yourself piece by piece, then you already know. The sweetest revenge isn't making them regret what they did. It's becoming someone they never imagined you could be. If this story hit you in the gut, gave you chills, or reminded you that you're worth more than anyone ever told you, hit that like button, subscribe for more raw and real stories like this, and drop a comment below. What's the most satisfying revenge you've ever seen or lived? And remember, even if no one else believes in you, that doesn't matter. Believe in yourself. That's where everything changes. We'll see you in the next one. Stay strong, stay standing, and keep writing your own story.